I'm Frank Vaughn. It's July 9th, 2025, and I don't have to sugarcoat anything because I'm not beholden to anybody. There's the viewer, and if you all stop watching, there's absolutely no utility in me continuing. But you keep tuning in. 125,000 unique viewers in the last month. 29,000 hours of watch time because we may be small and we may be invisible because we are not monetized, but it doesn't matter. You keep coming back. And that's the only thing that beholds me. But it doesn't change how I cover things. Yesterday's video didn't cause as much controversy as I thought it might actually cause. And I want to say, the vast majority of people who watch this channel get it. And they get the way that I do things. And that those who tend to trigger me are actually a minority. But I'm fired up today because I want to talk about, and we're going to talk about the news. There's so many news items we're going to cover. But we're just going to do this introductory preamble to just briefly revisit what we did yesterday. I want to make it clear that when I look at the history of things, when I look at the history of the Second World War, there's a whole pile of villains spread out all over the place. There's this deification, for instance, of Sir Winston Churchill, and an absolute ignorance, and when I say ignorance, I mean ignoring what he did in India, to name just one set of circumstances. Do you realize that in the wake of the defeat of the French, the allies of the English, when the German armies marched across Europe, marched across France, and took them out, that within days, the British fleet opened fire on French ships in the port of Oran in Algeria and killed 1,250 French soldiers and put them to the bottom of the ocean, simply to stop the Germans from getting those ships. And I also mentioned in yesterday's video Dresden, and I can go on at length about the war crimes committed by the victors. This is why I always resist this idea that there are heroes in warfare. There are sides. There are causes. There are national interests. Seldom there are heroes. But I want to talk about this just quickly, and I'm sorry. We'll get to the news. Skip ahead if you want. Skip ahead a few minutes, and this will all be done. Facts don't lie, says Frank. The government lies. Also, Frank, the government narrative is the truth about World War II. This has got to be the stupidest thing I read yesterday, because the government doesn't dictate what history is. History is dictated by the documents. When I said yesterday that in the First World War, there were no villains, that is backed up by the evidence. Even though the story, the myth that there was evil and good in the First World War rather than just equal national interests in an alliance system, the information is there. You can know exactly how the First World War transpired, but for the surface level public mind, the villain story suffices. But we can know things. And we know things because of the source material, because of the documentation. This person claims they've read everything I've read. They clearly have not. Their idea is, in essence, the argument that's spelled out in these back and forths is everything is fake that descends to us from, or that comes to us from history. That you can't believe any of the source material. You can't believe any of the testimony at Nuremberg. Sorry for the cut. My lungs continue to be uncooperative. That's going to continue for a while. You can't believe the diaries of Goebbels himself. You can't believe any of the source material because it all came down to us from the government. But I'm supposed to believe some guy on the internet who has some theory that Adolf was a noble warrior trying to save Europe. Even though I pointed out, someone else commented, and this is like, people have such a poor understanding of the timeline of events. Blaming, and I've actually brought this up before in the past, blaming the Red Army for everything that happened in Eastern Europe. I'm with you. I actually have an open question mark and always have in my head as to how many people the so-called liberating Red Army liquidated themselves when they liberated those camps, when they liberated Eastern Europe. They put a lot of people to death themselves, but the victors write history. And in that case, we don't have open and transparent documentation to give us numbers. It's very gray. However, we do know exactly what happened under German occupation because all of those documents came down to us. This person's allegations. When I talked yesterday about the things that happened under German occupation in Poland, and I began to talk about a little bit about Eastern Europe, the individual that I'm talking about said that the Red Army was responsible for all of it, yet the Red Army hadn't set foot on the soils I'm talking about yet. Timelines are all messed up. It's amazing to me. First off, how few there were, but it's amazing to me that people will still race to the defense of the Germans, or they will say things which I agree with. Bolshevism and communism has been responsible for far more death in the world. I've brought this up myself. That you can sell and market a beer in Canada with the hammer and sickle on it, call it Bolshevik Bastard. I saw this in Ontario. Bolshevik Bastard, you can market that, it's fine. Killed way more people. But if the Germans hadn't been defeated and they had gone on to rule for decades, they would have killed just as many and more, because their ideology, as well as the communist ideology, were equally evil, and I can't believe I have to explain this. But moving on now to the actual news of the day, let's talk about Israel for a second. Now, everybody knows that Israel leveled Gaza. I mean, leveled it. 70 to 80% of all the structures in Gaza have been leveled. This is Rafah. From 2023, it's probably not going to look very good if you're on a cell phone. Hopefully you're on a bigger screen. I can't make this video any bigger. But the point should be illustrated and pretty obvious. The Israelis completely wiped out the entire city, and this is something that is repeated all across the Gaza Strip as a response to what happened in October all those months and years ago. So keep this in mind. They've cleared the way. They've bulldozed everything. They've bombed it out of existence. And now they want to build a concentration camp. And this is the headline over at Zero Hedge. Israeli Defense Minister unveils plan for concentration camp in Gaza. Of course, he doesn't call it a concentration camp, even though that's what it is. And of course, those who are pure Israeli homers get all upset when you dare use the term concentration camp because of the ghost of anti-Semitism in Nazi Germany. But just like the Germans, as I highlighted yesterday, how long do they have to live in the shadow of what happened in the 1940s and the 1930s before they can summon themselves a national identity, not a renewal, as many German politicians want to make the AfD seem. They want to paint the AfD as a renewal of Nazism. It couldn't be further from the truth. It is a very big tent that props up the AfD against all odds. How long is it before the Germans can have an identity? Do they have to leave their borders wide open so that people with malintent can come into their country and just slaughter them recklessly? Because that's what's happening in Germany. The crime wave is driven by the migrants. The violence is driven by the migrants. How long until they can assert themselves again? And I think that time is now. But again, on another point, how long can the Israelis hide behind the Holocaust? And that's exactly what it is. Their human rights violations are plethora. That's going to anger a lot of people in my audience. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend that the Israelis and the Israeli army are puritanical, that their virtue is unblemished. I wouldn't be able to do that. The legal record of prosecutions against individual Israeli members of the army speaks for itself, but far more go unprosecuted. And I've said this time and time again. The wars in the Middle East, the wars that Israel are conducting, are wars for survival. The people that they're fighting have promised to wipe Israel off the map. Likewise, Israel is fighting for dominance of the region. Two sides using maximum warfare to further their objectives. The issue that we have, the issue that I have, is we deify one side and we condemn the other side. And both sides do this. Both teams do this. Whereas what we should be doing is looking at national interests and assessing things in that way. From the article, with Gaza ceasefire negotiations underway and President Trump raising hopes of a big deal being reached by week's end, Defense Minister Israeli Katz on Monday revealed that the IDF will create what it calls a humanitarian city in the wasteland that is Rafah. Remember the video? They leveled Rafah. And then forcibly concentrate Gaza's entire population of 2 million people inside it. Though the Israeli government and its advocates are likely to condemn already widespread usage of the term concentration camp to describe this undertaking, likely claiming it's somehow anti-Semitic given the parallels with Nazi Germany, it's unambiguously applicable under the Merriam-Webster dictionary definition of the term concentration camp, a place where large numbers of people, such as prisoners of war, political prisoners, refugees, or the members of an ethnic or religious minority, are detained or confined under armed guard. In the first phase, the IDF plans to round up 600,000 displaced Palestinians, displaced by what? Israeli bombs, who are living in the coastal Mawasi area, and move them to Rafah, a city. It's not a city, it's a wasteland, that borders Egypt and Israel. Eventually, every Gaza resident will be moved after security screening. The land, which Israel will take, will be settled and become permanently annexed as part of Israel. That's what's going to happen. Another thing, just a little anecdote before we continue along this vein. There's all this talk of normalization of relations with Jolani in Syria. I predict that Jolani is a useful pawn for the moment. Eventually, he will be betrayed and destroyed by the West and by Israel as Israel seeks to gain more dominance in Syria and counter Turkey. He's useful as a stopgap at the moment to take pressure off of the IDF's already strained forces, but eventually he's going to die too, just like Gaddafi, just like Assad, although Assad, he made it out he didn't die. Just like all the attempted assassinations of the Iranian regime, the war machine that is pursuing its interests, its national interests, will eventually turn on Jolani. I'm not sure, and here's the icing on the cake. While the Israeli military will secure the perimeter, the Netanyahu government is looking for some type of international organization to take charge of the interior, to include overseeing the distribution of aid, an enterprise currently managed by the shadowy Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. With the IDF dishing out mass killings of Palestinians approaching the 8 points, more than 600 are reported dead. They are using live ammunition for crowd control. No more clear a war crime and a human rights violation could you get. These are unarmed people trying to get food, and it might be chaotic, but they're using live ammo and mowing them down. There's plenty of video evidence for this. It's documented, and it's part of reality. Whistleblowing soldiers, that is Jews, have told reporters that lethal weapons are being used against unarmed people as brute force crowd control. So, which Jews am I supposed to believe? Am I supposed to believe the Zionists in the government, or am I supposed to believe the soldiers that are dutifully obeying orders and watching these people be slaughtered? The cover-up is incredible. This pretending of virtue, this idea that Israel upholds a higher standard. This is war. There are no standards. The standard is victory. Katz's announcement contradicts what the IDF Chief of Staff's office told Israel's High Court on the very same day in response to a petition filed by IDF reserve soldiers asking the court to determine if Israel was violating international law by forcibly displacing Palestinians, with perhaps the ultimate goal of expelling them. The Chief of Staff's office said there is no plan to move masses of Gaza residents or to concentrate them somewhere in the territory. However, that assurance is itself seemingly contradicted by the operations order for Gideon's Chariots, the IDF's latest operation launched in May, which says one objective is managing and mobilizing the civilian population to concentrate them. Also, Katz reiterated Israel's intention to subsequently facilitate Palestinians' departures to other countries, telling reporters that Israel will implement the immigration plan, which will happen. So kicking Palestinians out of Gaza or concentrating them in a great big humanitarian facility in Rafah, leaving the Gaza Strip open for the settlement of Israeli settlers. Is this any different from the way that the Germans divided up Poland in 1939, creating a zone for the Germans to settle, expelling the Polish, expelling the Jews, expelling everybody else into the general government? The things I covered yesterday. Some of these methods were pioneered in Nazi Germany, and you're not supposed to say it. But here I am saying it. But I'll tell you at the exact same time that the mustache man was not a good man. He was a megalomaniac. He was probably severely mentally ill by at least the start of the war, led his nation into total ruin, and led to the mass death, for all of you who are concerned about white futures, the mass death of tens of millions of white peoples. And, just to put a bow on it, was concerned only with the German people and viewed the other white races as lessers. But back to the current day, the war in the Middle East is not over. It's just on pause. And I'll tell you, the Houthis seem to have a heck of a PR team. This is their video showing an attack on a commercial ship. And it goes on. Drone footage. It shows them raiding the bridge. This is PR by supposedly illiterate sand people, to use the colloquial that's often used. Remember that Israel bombed Yemen just this week? And there it is. That is going to the bottom of the drink by the Houthis, which have been bombed by the United States, which have been bombed by Israel, and still appear to be quite effective in the conduct of their mission. So effective, in fact, that they've got drone footage and took their sweet time pulling this operation off without another naval vessel in sight to stop them. It's interesting, isn't it? All to say that with the Houthis still operational, with the Iranian regime still intact and quite strong in spite of all the rumors about their imminent fall and spontaneous uprisings, when you go and bomb a people, it tends to unify them around a regime rather than encourage them to overthrow it. The war is in a bit of a sitzkrieg. It's in a bit of a pause. It can flare up again at any time. Moving on to something we talked about yesterday, President Trump goes off on reporter for asking about Jeffrey Epstein. Pam Bondi says videos involving children and the Epstein files cannot be released ever. Let's just watch the clip.
Could I just interrupt for 1 second? Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time?
How is it unbelievable? This was a core feature of your campaign, Mr. Trump, was actually giving us the truth. The man had videos in every room where his guests stayed on his island. There's a lot of things the public already knows, those of us who are actually informed on the question. We don't need to see the videos to know who the adults were that were in those videos. We already know that he was a blackmailer and that blackmail underpins politics. We're going to watch another clip here shortly about that. We know that he had a client list. We know that Maxwell is in jail for the very things that you people are now saying didn't happen. This is a cover-up, flat-out cover-up, and I am, like I said, I'm not beholden to anybody. I am deeply concerned about the direction the Trump administration is taking on this file and other files, as seemingly they have completely abandoned Campaign Trump on those files in favor of neocon talking points, or in this case, a very disturbing cover-up. Now, the clip in question is by investigative journalist Nick Bryant, who is as in the know or more in the know when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein than I am, and I just think he summarizes it very well. So let's listen.
Blackmail plays an integral role, and I've been at this for 21 years, and Epstein had cameras in all of his homes. I mean, Epstein was definitely a blackmail artist. And the government wants to make sure that does not come out. That a huge part of our political system is predicated on blackmail. And especially if that dark, malignant corner of the intelligence that is using blackmail against our politicians and other people, if they were using children, I mean, that would make the American people erupt. So that's why that Wikipedia page is locked down. And that's why this is important. This is, for that dark corner of intelligence, this is Omaha Beach. They're not going to give an inch because this is the last thing that they want out. And it's amazing how the Epstein scandal has been covered up. If you look at all the victims and all the perpetrators and all the procurers involved in the Epstein network, I mean, we're talking and the people that facilitated it, like the pilots and like Epstein's house managers and the cooks and everybody else. We're talking scores and scores of people, and no one's been indicted except for Ghislaine Maxwell.
And it's, I'm thinking about as well that massive drug bust that happened here in Canada, where one individual responsible for production on his own, responsible for distribution on his own, responsible for money laundering on his own, responsible for muscle on his own, one individual, $500 million drug bust. It's a cover-up. This is a cover-up, too, for all the reasons that Nick highlights. This is why I say, stop deifying politicians and national interests. We should be able to have out here in Plebville, because we're not on the inside, we should be able to assess every single national government, every single imperial force in the world, every single nation as a basket of interests and deny them the shield of absolute virtue. Because there are people out there, and you can actually discern this now, in the wake of the Epstein stuff, the people who are denying a cover-up, who are more than happy. I actually think Tucker Carlson, he does this interview. I haven't actually watched this yet, but this is one of the best journalists that's out there right now. His interviews on his channel are so highly informative and well done that I would recommend everybody watch him. And there are certain individuals in the influencer space and in the news space that condemn this man for daring to provide the other side of the story. Some want him jailed. Well, I'm here to endorse his work. It's fantastic. And at the opening of this, and that's as far as I've gotten, the opening monologue, he sarcastically offers his apology to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell because we were all wrong. He's just an innocent victim. It's disgusting. It's disgusting, the excuses that so-called good people, so-called voices in the alternative media will make for this, will make for Israel, will make for mass immigration, will make for whitewashing what happened in Germany in the name of chasing a hero coming to save us, which will never happen because we're not even close to remotely in the same situation, and Hitler was no hero anyway. We're not going to do that here. That's not what this channel is about. I do want to talk about some good news, though, out of the Trump administration. Trump himself has commented saying, we're going to give the farmers the people they need, but we're not talking amnesty.
What we're doing is we're getting rid of criminals, but we are doing a work program. Do you want to explain that, Chris?
Yeah, this morning we talked about, of course, this was a top of mind question. This morning we talked about protecting the farmers and the farmland, but obviously this president's vision of no amnesty, mass deportation continues, but in a strategic way, and then ensuring that our farmers have the labor that they need. Secretary Chavez-Durimer has been a leader on this, obviously just...
Okay, so you heard it from his mouth. No amnesty. Mass deportations will continue. The issue is that the Trump administration, when it decides to shift gears, it just completely forgets the things that Donald Trump himself has said in the past. So when it comes to the big, beautiful bill, increasing the nation's national debt, not bombing Iran, the issue surrounding the Epstein files, the Fort Knox audit that never happened, many of the things that he talked very strongly about disappear. Many of the friends that did so much work for him, like Elon Musk, I don't want to call them friends, partners, that did so much work to help Donald Trump win the election and put him over the line, when they dare question Donald Trump, they're thrown under the bus, and he uses his position as president to threaten Elon Musk personally, as well as on a business level, to threaten SpaceX contracts, to threaten contracts and to target him. It was so funny how MAGA people, Canadians, were all about targeting Elon Musk for destruction. And MAGA was horrified by it. They said, what did Elon Musk do except try to save the taxpayer money? Why Elon Musk? Why is he the one that's getting singled out? But then as soon as Trump turns on Elon Musk, they turn on him too. Because there's a bit of a cult of personality going on here. one that I don't wish to play into. Whenever I've done a comparison of the superiority of the Constitution versus this corrupt and broken federation that we know as Canada, this thing that I feel no loyalty to whatsoever anymore, no pride in. Once again, hard for me to come up with a single good thing to say about the product of the federal government, the federation, and the system that we live under. And I can identify that the Constitution is a superior document. And even with the problems I have with this president, not to mention the vast number of problems I've had with previous presidencies, I would be better off living under the Constitution. Doesn't change the fact that when this president changes his mind, he often gets irritated when people remind him of the things he said in the past. And he doesn't just get irritated, he gets rather rude and will deny his previous commitments and actually get exasperated when people dare ask questions about what happened to Epstein. It's incredible to me. But for now, there's no amnesty. God knows if that's going to hold over the next month or two. Hopefully it does, because this is some of the most important work, maybe the single most important thing that the administration can do for the future of America is getting the illegal problem solved, securing the border, and securing the elections that underpin the future of the Republic, if it's to have any future. And maybe down the road we can see some of these problems that are being turfed by the wayside, the financial difficulty of the United States, the crumbling infrastructure, many of the things that were promised on the campaign trail. Maybe they'll come back into focus, but I don't know. It's hard to trust any politician these days, because no sooner do the words exit their mouth than they are altered. And when altered, politicians don't appreciate being questioned about the alteration. And it sucks. I just wish there would be one politician in my life that didn't disappoint. I'm Frank Vaughn. I'll see you in the next one. Did you know that I have a website? frankvaughn.ca, the ultimate repository for all of my work, and a backup location just in case the censors come for me again. And if you like the content, please consider using the donate link in one of the options available. There are no paywalls, there is no advertising, and there is no Patreon, and I intend to keep it that way. Thank you for your time and your consideration.